like. They could say categorically, this is not halal and not religiously slaughtered. They don't for Bernard Matthews in Suffolk, where we heard that all of it is religiously slaughtered. She, about 10 years ago, said that halal registration was funding terrorism.
This episode's amazing, and returning guest is Catherine Blakelock. How are you doing, Catherine?
Good morning. How are you, Nick?
I'm good. First of all, apologies to Catherine, because I was put up my Christmas tree and forgot all about this conversation. I had to get a phone call saying, "Where are you, Nick?" So I had to put the Christmas tree down, run upstairs and turn my PC on. We all can forget things. That's my excuse anyway. The last time we had a conversation was about halal slaughter and religious slaughter. And it opened my eyes. I reached out to you for that conversation because I didn't know much about it myself. I knew what halal slaughter was, just like I knew what kosher slaughter was. But all I knew, I could write it in a sentence. That was all I knew about it. And after that conversation we had, where you're estimating something like 65-70% of all the meat we eat in the UK is religiously slaughtered, you call it fake halal slaughter, because it's not really halal, but it is religious slaughter. And it was all to do with keeping the costs down in the abattoirs. It was rule bending so they could slaughter animals less humanely, but cheaper, and getting away with it. In our first conversation, as a recap, is that about right?
Well, things move on as we discover more, because it's really difficult to get real information because we are not involved in slaughterhouses. So I think it is as much as well to expand the market so that you can mix stuff up, you can export all over the place. You've got an animal where a leg is going to UAE and the middle staying here or whatever. So it's not halal certified. I think it's really difficult to get information. But definitely things like stunning are less, etc. So it's a work in progress, and we have sent the first pre-judicial review letters out. One to and they have to go out to the local authorities who are regulating this. One of them's gone out to the abattoir that Waitrose is using for the lamb. And another one is for Bernard Matthews in Suffolk, where we heard that all of it is religiously slaughtered. So things, because we are having to ironically use the Muslim websites to determine what is religiously slaughtered. This is the irony. We're using Muslim websites to determine if it's on lists.
Please excuse this interruption. Anglophobia. Why do they hate us? Is it jealousy, envy?
Which is completely nuts, because if we had a proper government and a proper local authorities, and supermarkets as well do not need to be ordered to label this stuff. They can label it. They label it higher welfare or fed on corn or whatever they like to call it, butter free or butterful. They can call it whatever they like. They could say categorically, this is not halal and not religiously slaughtered. They don't. And so we end up with these conversations with supermarkets, and I've had another one with Sainsbury's where I did a subject access request after I bought some meat, and it took 10 emails before, and they were quite sort of, I wouldn't say nasty, but they made snide comments in the emails like, "Oh, well, very good for your persistence." It's nothing to do. I shouldn't need to be persistent. You should answer the question. And finally, we had them state in writing 10 times that none of their meat, their own label meat, and it's all about words. So own label meat was religiously slaughtered or halal. And then I proved them that they were wrong. So I eventually boiled it down to pinpoint to a piece of lamb I'd bought that says can be Welsh or New Zealand. The piece that I got delivered was from New Zealand, where 98% of the lamb that's exported is religiously slaughtered or halal. And then they finally admitted it, but then said they didn't order it, as though that was anything to do with it. I mean, you bought it. It doesn't matter whether you didn't specify it. So, yeah, so that's where we were with that. More interesting and
Before we move on from that, I'd like to go back to Bernard Matthews, because what you just then, what you just said then, I can see lots of Christians around the country being absolutely appalled at that. I'm not a Christian, so it doesn't affect me in this way. So when do we eat turkeys in this Christmas? We tend to eat most turkeys on Christmas Day. It's not, obviously, eating turkeys has got nothing to do with the birth of Christ, but it's become a tradition in this country that we have turkey on Christmas Day to celebrate Christmas, which is a religious holiday, Christian religious holiday. And now, not knowingly, all these Christian families are eating Islamic slaughtered meat on the holiest day in the Christian calendar. You couldn't write this. You couldn't make this up. I foresee lots of Christians, proper Christians, being extremely angry at that.
well, the interesting thing is that what happens is the supermarkets and schools as well just dismiss it that, oh, well, it had a little prayer. But my point is, it didn't have a prayer to Christ or Buddha or Shiva or any Hindu gods or any Sikh gods, etc., Jain gods. You could make a pantheon of them. For Sikhs, it's even worse. They have it in their religion that it's absolutely forbidden, and that if they ate it, they would turn into a Muslim. Uh, and so, and people, and the schools and hospitals just say, "Well, you can be vegetarian then." So why don't we make the Muslims be vegetarian? Why is it us who have to change? Um, for traditional Christianity, of course, it's the same thing. I mean, it says in the Old Testament, "Don't worship false idols." So, yeah, this philosophical religious issue is as much an issue as the cruelty issue, because the supermarkets always revert back to, well, it's stunned. Well, again, we've had this conversation about stunning. They're stunning and stunning. They're not all, it's like saying, oh, somebody had an anesthetic. Well, you could have a general anesthetic, or you could have a bit of numbness put in your tooth. And that's what we're talking about here. So one is a bolt, basically non-recoverable, and then the other is an electric shock where the animal might wake up. Or we believe in chickens and some turkeys and nothing much at all. It's all sort of theoretical stunning. But yeah, so there's so many issues involved in this.
Let me go back to 2 points. The first point is the supermarkets and the schools saying to you that it's only a little prayer, and if you don't want to eat it, be a vegetarian. Well, that's fine if you labeled the meat and the school told the parents it was all halal. Maybe parents then could make a choice and maybe send their child to school to order a vegetarian meal. But you can't do that when no one tells you and they're hiding it. And the second point I was going to say was, you said something at the first chat we had, which always stuck with me. And it was this, talking about animal cruelty, that this so-called stunning and this so-called religious slaughter is the grooming gang scandal for the animal world. Because what we're doing is we're allowing all these animals to basically be tortured, then have the throat slit. So the torture isn't having the throat slit, even though it's torture as well. It's the so-called stunning. So we're going to electrocute you first. And while you're reeling in pain from that, we're going to slit your throat. But yet we have laws to protect animals, just like we had laws to protect white working class girls. But for the sake of convenience, for votes, in this case, for money as well. But for all those things, we're ignoring it. And that's a great phrase you used. This is the grooming gang scandal, but for animals.
Yeah, I think I should use that again. The other issue is the 2 points you raised there. Number one is that there's we've done I've started doing some surveys at schools. So we have to separate supermarkets from schools because supermarkets do not have to label, and it's much more difficult to find out what they're doing because they're private companies and they don't need to answer. Although we will hopefully bring the Trade Descriptions Act into our legal process. But, I have to remind people, if anybody's sort of getting agitated, that it's taking 2 to 3 years to get cases into the small claims court. So it's a very small process because every single letter has to be allowed 14 or 28 days to reply, and then you wait back for the next answer. And of course, people always answer on the 28th day. With schools, we've done some surveying. So we did 150 schools, of which 99 didn't reply. And then we had to take reminders out. We got a few more. Out of those, they were in the Maidenhead, Reading, Berkshire area. We about 28% were serving halal. But three of those 28%, which was obviously about 20 of them, three were not labeling it. The other 20 something were labeling it. But the question you then have to go back is, well, who are you labeling it to? Because if you've got a 3-year-old, they cannot make decisions and don't even know what halal is. And so if they fancy the lamb burger rather than the grotti pasta, they will be making a decision on that. The other thing about the schools was we had, from the Diocese of Oxford, a Christian school. I had a letter that was absolutely abusive from a Christian school, saying that I was a commercial operation, that I was making money out of it, that I was trying to subvert democracy, and then put no name on it. Like this great long, disgusting email. And that I should destroy this letter and I should destroy my. And so and then about 2 days later, somebody went, oh my goodness, what have they sent out? Because Oxford is one of the most woke left-wing places. And I get somebody from sort of compliance say, oh, sorry, ignore that letter. Um, just we do serve labeled halal. So they answered the question. Although Robin Tilbrook, who's helping me, we'd already put together a legal response to that letter, to which I answered, well, sorry, I'm not destroying that letter because that was an FOI request from a public body. It's not destroyable. And so I have asked them further questions specifically. And this is the issue. You go and say, even if they say it's labeled, well, it's labeled on their supplier coming in, but and there are, in schools, there's quite clearly 3 types of school. That's we've established. There's schools that absolutely do not serve halal. There's schools that serve both, and there's schools that serve only halal. And again, that you can subdivide that into those that say it and those that don't. Well, generally, I think the ones that serve only halal don't label it. But yes, so I will, when I've got a bit more data, because I'm doing some other areas, produce a list of these schools. But as I said to you before we started, it's a very time-consuming process because you have to wait. And then you have schools come back with sort of ridiculous things like, oh, the 28 days is 28 days term time, not 28 days calendar time. So we want another 10 days to answer this question, which is like, well, it should be fairly straightforward. But it isn't, of course, because I believe as well, some of the schools don't know, because so much food is now contracted out to catering companies. Now we've got a list of the catering companies, or it's contracted by local authorities. So I don't know if I said this, but for example, we found the contract for Lancashire Council, which is run by Reform, that is contracting for £300,000 or £400,000 worth of halal meat. Now, did I mention that before to you? that's incitement because they are the people who are inciting the killing of animals in the contract for so they are people that we can the contractors and the council's contract are one of the easier targets.
Mm. Going back to the schools, when some of them are saying we're labeling it halal, and that's a vague term, as you said. What the hell does that mean?
They always say stunned hello.
Stunned halal. That could also mean that somewhere on their massive website is one line at the bottom of some page saying, our meat's halal. They've labeled it. They've informed parents, they've informed the world, but they've hidden it so low on a website that no one goes on. So they could make any excuse they want.
Yeah, and that's why we have to go back again to 28 that said that they were serving halal is to make those points. So yeah, and you end up with more points because they answer in they either and the other thing about these things is that and I've learned this from Rowan Tilburg, is that if you ask three questions, they answer two and miss the one they don't want to answer out. So then you have to write again. So it's basically you have to ask them one question at the time. Because if you ask them a pile of them, you just get rubbish. And that was what I had with Sainsbury's. And we've had the same thing with Waitrose. So Waitrose, you start with if you start with the question, do you sell halal? They will say no. Although, by the way, with many of the supermarkets, Sainsbury's has got a massive halal section now. So they clearly do, but they'll say it's not their own label. But you go around and round and round until you finally have to pin them down. And then you say, but the religious slaughter is Islamic religious slaughter. It's not Christian religious slaughter. So therefore it's halal.
I've seen lots of your tweets recently where you've gone, I mean, this must be costing you a fortune because meat's not cheap, where you've gone in different supermarkets, bought chicken, bought meat, gone home with it, looked at the code on it, done some research and find out where that's been slaughtered. And then you find out, oh, this was slaughtered in an abattoir that only does religious halal slaughter. So therefore, it has to be halal religious slaughtered. No labels on the meat. And like you said, there's no requirement for them to label the meat that it is. Now, is this...
Can I just pick up? That's maybe not correct because these slaughterhouses can do multiple types of slaughter.
Right.
The same slaughterhouse can switch. However, I have managed to get hold of somebody in Scotland who's working inside an abattoir, which converted for lamb from ordinary slaughter to halal. And they told me that the stun is 50% of what it was before. And that some of the animals are waking up and that they have all this paperwork and other stuff, etc. But that they also at times do switch from one to the other. And it's a great fiasco to do the switching. So that is the other issue about what goes on in slaughterhouses.
Isn't that a great thing to do as a slaughterhouse? To muddy the water by constantly switching from one to the other, because then you can always lie, nobody will know, and if you ever caught out on a lie, your excuse is, oh, we must have misunderstood because it must have swapped over that week or this swapped off. So it's a great way of muddying the water. So people like you, nosy people like you, sticking your nose in where it shouldn't belong, we've got great excuses now to bat you away.
Right. Well, I've started on another train of thought. I mean, I've got multiple train of inquiry, and this is really at the beginning. But I don't know if you've seen the enormous scandal that's going on in Minnesota with the Somalis, with this 250, oh, I think it's more than that. I think it's like maybe $1 billion of aid and other things that's been siphoned off to Al-Shabaab. Well, Pauline Hanson, who you probably know of, who is the Australia First parliamentarian, went into Parliament last week wearing a burqa after her birth. Yeah. She, about 10 years ago, said that halal registration was funding terrorism. And she couldn't prove it. So we thought, well, where's the money going? Because it's really big business. Because I'm talking now more generally than just meat. Kellogg's cornflakes is halal certified. Ben and Jerry's ice cream, Haribo, lists and lists of food is halal certified. The Indians have been having a great big thing about it because they've had halal water, certified stuff. But we have 20. They're not agencies; they are private companies who are doing halal registration. They're not governed by anything. So I started with the first one, looking at it. It has about £1.5 million of income, and it's making a surplus, and any surplus it's then sending to a charity, which I presume is a Muslim charity. But if you look at the director of that, he's the director of about 20 companies. I have to be careful, and that's why I'm not at the moment giving any names, because he's got an enormously expensive sports car outside a house that's probably in Rachel Reeves' £2 million house thing, mansion tax, although it's not particularly posh, but it's a big house, detached house in London. And he's the director of 20 companies, of which one of them is at one of the big halal certification boards that's doing certification for schools. And he's then, not only is there this charity above that's sending the halal money, but there's 3 other charities he's got, as well as a pile of schools with you wonder what sort of colleges and schools they are, whether they're visa farming or whatever they're doing. But these investigations are very difficult to do, but it's certainly a chain of thought that I wanted to look at as to, and then completely unregulated by anybody. We could set one up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the halal certification you've just explained then sounds to me straight away a little bit like the Stonewall program, where, oh, you're a business, you sign up to our Stonewall pledges and we'll give you a badge, and you're pride friendly, you're Stone. It's one of those, it sounds like a money-making gift, that if you want to sell to our people, then you need this badge so our people know that you're one of the good guys. And for this badge, we're going to charge you.
Significant amounts. It'd be, we need to go through all the financial accounts of these companies, but there's, it's fairly significant. The turnover of the first one, it's about £1.5 million a year. Not nothing. And then the other thing that obviously we're seeing more and more, this is a separate subject, but more and more in high streets are halal butchers popping up in all sorts of towns, halal supermarkets. This is a fairly new thing.
Yeah, I mean, halal when I was growing up was a niche market. Particular people who were Islamic religious would use certain butchers for that. And I remember monitoring in my area, because I came from not predominantly, but it's predominantly now. It wasn't when I was growing up a Muslim area, but there's Muslims there. But you're right, now you see it absolutely everywhere. But going back to the supermarkets, you've mentioned Sainsbury's, you've mentioned Waitrose. From the tweets you've sent out explaining some of this, it seems to be every single supermarket in the UK. Is that correct?
I would say so, yes. And then there are 1 or 2 local farmers and small abattoirs who are saying our meat is never religiously slaughtered. And I'm just saying, well, why don't you really label that? Why don't you really push that? Because I actually think there's a market for the opposite. A market for properly labeled things, because people are fed up with it. And I would, if I had 2 chickens and one says nothing and one says this is 100% guaranteed, not halal religiously slaughtered, I will buy the right hand side one.
I think you're right. I think there was a market for that, but there would be a backlash. The backlash would be that company is racist, that company is Islamophobic, that company is racist. There would be a backlash, and those companies know that. And the safer option is the status quo. Just carry on doing what we're doing, and let's not upset anyone.
Yeah, and then people bring up kosher as well. And of course, I had no idea really. And to be fair, this we need to be I think I hate the word discrimination because I think the word discrimination has caused all the problems. Everything is about discrimination. But for example, I didn't know that Tate and Lyle sugar is kosherly certified. Did you?
I didn't know there was any such thing.
Well, there's lots of kosher. There is kosher certification. Yes. So there's kosher salt. You might have seen that.
I've seen kosher salt, but I didn't think that was kosher. I thought that was would have another meaning. But yeah, I've heard of kosher. Right.
The interesting thing is, if you look at American recipes, they often ask for kosher salt, which is quite extraordinary. But yeah, there is a kosher certification um, thing. Again, I haven't had time to look at it, but basically, somebody made a comment, and I think they're right that every custard in school is kosher, has got kosher certified sugar in it, which is, there really is no difference
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that and having some halal certified Kellogg's cornflakes.
Oh no, I completely agree. That's why.
The whole lot ought to be got rid of. I mean, the whole lot ought to be labeled and got rid of. I mean, seriously, in my opinion. But yes, and going back to some of the stuff that Rupert's put out, yes, I would ban halal and kosher slaughter, the non-stun stuff instantly in a moment. But we're going down the route that we're going down simply because we think we can have some success on it. And maybe Rupert Lowe or something revolutionary will happen and we'll have a right-wing government and we won't need to be going where we're going. But we're doing this as a stopgap measure to try to get some light on the subject and try to get some legislation on the subject. If we could get trading, we can prosecute trading standards as well. For example, what people said, oh, well, you won't get any word trading standards, but that's because they are just writing letters as opposed to actually threatening or taking legal action.
It's my understanding now through talking to you a couple of months ago and educating myself on it. Now talking to lots of other people who have no idea what's going on. They think they don't eat halal meat unless they go to an Indian, Pakistani restaurant sort of thing, in which case they've made a choice to go there and they know what they're eating. But I think this religious slaughter issue is going to be the next big thing in the culture war. Just like I think it's going to be as big as the trans issue, as in men going into female spaces. And I think probably a year or two from now, I think this will be one of the biggest talking points in the country about how we're eating religious slaughtered meat for a minority religion and we're being lied about it. And our concerns about animal welfare mean nothing as long as it affects a minority group in the country. I think this is going to be huge, and that's why you need to continue.
The religious issue, I think the philosophical religious. That's assuming that the animal welfare was not an issue at all. I don't want to eat Islamically slaughtered religious meat. Like in the same way as I am absolutely appalled of the mosque in the Lake District and our churches being converted to mosques. Completely appalled by it. I don't want anything to do with it. And and it's the Islamification of our country, the complete corruption, the complete cultural, capture of our local authorities, schools, etc.
Well, keep on doing what you're doing, Catherine, because people need to know about this. Then they can make their own choices, but they need the information first about what they're eating. As always, thanks for coming on, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.